The Horus Heresy. Unyielding, technologically capable, ruthless, and insular, the Dark Angels at the time of the Horus Heresy would once again be a powerful and highly independent legion, used to operating on their own to conduct large-scale campaigns and compliance actions. Because of this, the fear of the First Legion's intervention led the machinations of the War Master Horus to ensure that when his treacherous plan came to fruition, the Dark Angels had been dispatched to the outer edges of the Imperium, where they would be unable to interfere, at least for a time. As the Horus Heresy progressed, however, the power of this legion would make itself known, savaging the Night Lords at Thramas and going on to unleash destruction on an unprecedented scale during the later years of the Heresy, when they crushed traitor world after traitor world across the southern galactic zone. The suppression of the Gordian League. During the 200th year of the Great Crusade, 998 M30, the Dark Angels Legion was carrying out an Imperial compliance campaign against the shield world of the so-called Gordian League, a confederation of human worlds who are allied with degenerate Xenos. During the 7-year-long campaign in 05 M31, the Dark Angels High Command received word that the War Master Horus and his 16th Legion had renounced their oaths of allegiance to the Emperor, along with the Primarch Angron's World Eaters, Mortarian's Death Guard, and Fulgrim's Emperor's Children. They also received word of the atrocity committed against the doomed world of Istvan III, when Horus ordered it to be virus-bombed to eliminate the remaining loyalist Astartes from those 4 traitor legions still active upon it, rendering it a lifeless, dead world. The War Master knew that the Emperor would respond with all the force he had available. Johnson believed that the Dark Angels' deployment to the Shield Worlds on Horus's orders was part of an effort to scatter the Imperium's most loyal servants as far as possible, in order to minimize the number of legions Horus would have to face at any given time. Even so, the strike force of 7 full Space Marine legions ordered to the Istvan system in response to the War Master's treachery posed a dire threat to Horus's survival, as they made their way towards his forward operating base on the world of Istvan V. The Battle of Diamat. L. Johnson's forces were too deeply enmeshed in the shield worlds of the Gordian League to respond quickly to Horus's betrayal. The best estimates of the Primarch's staff indicated that it would take them nearly 8 solar months to conclude their offensive operations, even on an emergency basis, and reposition themselves for a strike against Istvan V. Even if they could move more quickly, Horus's agents would be able to alert the War Master in time to organize a counter-strike. However, Johnson believed that a small, hand-picked force might accomplish what an entire legion could not. The Primarch issued orders for many of the Dark Angels' reserve squadrons to resupply and prepare for immediate deployment to the Tanagra system. Their primary target was to secure the Forge World of Diamat. They could not afford to let the War Master acquire the substantial supplies and ordnance needed to fortify the world of Istvan V against the approaching Loyalist strike force. L. Johnson would personally lead the expedition to Diamat with a battle group of 15 warships. Secrecy was vital, as the Primarch was aware that the War Master's agents were more than likely tracking the Dark Angels' movements. L. Johnson went to Diamat in order to secure several powerful continental siege machines known as ordinati, vast artillery pieces that could devastate the most powerful fortifications. The small fleet of Dark Angel's vessels arrived in the Tanagra system just 5 solar days after the destruction of Horus's landing force at the Xanthus starport. With no way to secure the siege machines held in storage in Diamat depots from L. Johnson's Astartes, the admiral of the raiding fleet had little choice but to withdraw back to the Istvan system. The War Master's final gambit had failed. Following this small victory at the Battle of Diamat, L. Johnson met with his fellow brother Primarch Perturabo of the Iron Warriors Legion aboard his flagship, the Invincible Reason. Perturabo informed Johnson that the 4th Legion was en route to the Istvan system to face the War Master and his traitor legions upon the black sands of Istvan V. Ferrus Manus and the Iron Hands Legion had hastened ahead of them, hungry to claim the Emperor's vengeance against Horus. Perturabo lied to L. Johnson, explaining that he had hoped that his legion could provision his vessels at the Xanthus starport above Diamat before continuing to the combat zone. Of course, they were now unable to, as the 1st Legion had destroyed the orbital port. Perturabo inquired of L. Johnson how he had learned of the existence of the Ordinati siege engines. Johnson explained that he had discovered them 50 Terran years earlier when he was studying the history of the Great Crusade, and saw a reference to them in a dispatch from Horus that had been sent to the Emperor. Horus had commissioned the colossal siege machines from the masters of Diamat during the long siege of the Xenos fortress states, Tethonus. The war machines took much longer for the Forge Masters to complete than planned. By the time they were finished, the campaign on Tethonus had been over for a standard year and a half, and Horus had moved on to other conquests. So the weapons were put into a depot on Diamat against the day when the War Master could come to claim them. But then the Istvan III atrocity occurred. When Johnson had received word of Horus's perfidy, he knew that ultimately the War Master's path would lead to terror. Even if he were somehow to prevail against Perturabo and the other legions sent to confront him in the Istvan system, the War Master couldn't claim total victory so long as the Emperor was safe in his palace. For Horus to triumph, the Emperor had to die, and that meant a long and costly siege of Terra. Therefore, the War Master would come to claim the siege engines of Diamat. L. Johnson informed his brother that he would be unable to accompany the Loyalist fleet to Diamat, as he had to make all haste to the shield worlds of the Gordian League and prepare the rest of the 1st Legion for the trip to Terra. In fact, he thought it best if no one outside Perturabo, himself and the other Primarchs, ever knew that the Lion was there. He didn't want the Emperor to believe he did anything at Diamat with an ulterior motive in mind. Perturabo agreed that it was both a prudent choice and a very humble one. L. Johnson explained that his actions were done for the good of the Imperium, not for accolades, nor for power. But L. Johnson confessed to his brother a certain jealousy. He believed Horus had become the Emperor's favorite son for no other reason than fate. Had he been the first of the Primarchs to be found, L. Johnson believed he would have been the War Master instead. The Lion also believed that Horus would inevitably be defeated, and that the Emperor would need to choose a new War Master very quickly if the Great Crusade was to continue. He asked for Perturabo's support. The two Primarchs ultimately reached an understanding. L. Johnson granted permission for the Iron Warriors to take possession of the siege engines at their convenience on one condition. L. Johnson made his brother promise that the Ordinati would be put to good use. His brother assured him that they would be, never letting on that he had already sworn himself to Horus's rebellion, and would participate only solar months later at the Drop Site Massacre on Istvan V, where 3 loyalist legions were almost completely destroyed.